The midday sun blazed mercilessly over the vast desert, turning every stone into a scorching brand and every breath into a desperate gasp. Heat waves shimmered off the dry earth, distorting the horizon and creating mirages that taunted the weary. Travelers. 3 wagons stood tilted on broken wheels, dust swirling through the air like ghostly hands. In the distance, vultures circled ominously, their cries echoing through the desolate landscape. "She's bleeding out!" a panicked male voice shouted. "We can't carry her, we'll all die!" another barked, urgency hardening into cold calculation. "Leave her then. She was just baggage from the start." A boot scraped the dirt, and a body hit the ground with a dull thud. Evelyn blinked against the blinding light, her vision blurred and her stomach churning. She felt a warm, wet burn in her side, sticky against her blouse. Blood. She tried to speak, to cry out, but all that came was a rasp. Dust clung to her tongue, and the footsteps faded as the wagons creaked and moved on. They left her. Evelyn lay there, still, her breath shallow and ragged. The sky wheeled overhead, vast and merciless. Time stopped meaning anything. Her thoughts unraveled, and pain became background noise. Somewhere between the agony and the surrender, she heard something else. Hoofbeats, slow, measured, purposeful. A shadow fell over her. Evelyn opened her eyes to find a figure crouched beside her. A man with dark hair, high cheekbones, and sun-worn skin. His face was unreadable. He didn't speak, didn't reach for her roughly. He just studied her, calm and deliberate, like a scout reading the earth. She tried to move, but couldn't. Her hand twitched near her hip, instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. He looked at her wound, then at her eyes. Still, he said nothing. With swift, practiced hands, he took a water skin from his side and gently tipped it to her lips. The water was warm but tasted like life. She drank until she choked. Then he lifted her. She wanted to fight, but her body refused. Everything hurt. Her head lulled against his chest, and for a moment she thought of the boys back home. The dances, the firelight. Then it was gone. Just heat and the steady rhythm of a horse beneath them. The ride blurred, up hills, through brush, into shadow. She faded in and out of consciousness. Once, she opened her eyes to see rock walls rising on either side. A canyon. Another time, stars, a fire in the distance, then nothing. When she next woke, it was to the sound of something bubbling, a soft crackle. The scent of herbs and smoke filled the air. She jerked upright, or tried to. Pain shot through her side, white-hot. She gasped, eyes darting. She was in a shelter of some kind. Not quite a cave, not quite a home. Woven mats lined the ground, and a small fire danced in a stone ring. No chains, no ropes, just stillness. She looked down. Her wound was cleaned, wrapped in cloth she didn't recognize. A blanket covered her legs, and her boots had been removed and set neatly beside the mat. She pushed herself up, wincing. Across the fire, the man from before knelt silently, stirring something in a pot suspended over the flame. Thick, fragrant, greenish-brown. She flinched as he rose. He walked over, slow, unthreatening, in his hands a clay bowl. He knelt beside her mat and set the bowl down gently, not too close. Then he backed away. No words, no gestures. Evelyn stared at the bowl. It steamed, and her stomach twisted in hunger. She looked at him, stoic, expressionless, waiting. She took the bowl with trembling fingers, brought it to her lips and drank. The taste was bitter, earthy, but her body welcomed it. Warmth spread through her chest, and tears welled in her eyes, sudden, uncontrollable. She wiped them away before. He could see, but when she looked up again, he was watching her. Not curious, not judgmental, just aware. She didn't know his name, didn't know why he saved her. But she knew without doubt that he had, and for now that was enough. Evelyn woke to the rustle of wind against the canyon walls and the muted scuffle of footsteps on stone. The fire had burned low, reduced to glowing embers. She sat up slowly, her side still tender but less angry than the night before. Her movements caught the attention of the man, Taza, she would later learn, who crouched by the fire, adding wood. She cleared her throat. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough but steady. He looked up, met her gaze, but gave no response. She tried again, slower. "You saved me." Nothing but the soft crackle of the fire between them. Evelyn frowned, then pointed to herself. "Evelyn." He watched, his head tilted slightly, curious. She tapped her chest. "Evie Lynn," he repeated. "Evie Lynn." Nothing but his eyes followed every move. Then he pointed to himself, open hand to chest. "Taza." She exhaled, a bit of tension leaving her shoulders. "Taza," she echoed. He nodded once, no smile, just confirmation. In the days that followed, they danced around understanding. She would speak in broken phrases. He would answer in gestures and silence. When she asked questions, he gave her the space to speak, but she realized he couldn't answer, didn't know how, and when she fell silent, he did not try to fill the air with noise. Instead, he watched carefully, attentively. It unnerved her at first, the way he looked at her, not the way men usually did. No hunger, no pity, just stillness, as if she were something to be understood, not used or pitied. She didn't know what to make of that. It felt like being studied by the stars. One morning, she drew shapes in the dirt with a twig, letters her mother had taught her how to read and write. A-B, she whispered aloud, tracing them with care. She wasn't doing it for any purpose, just to pass the time, to remind herself who she was. That afternoon, as the sun slipped lower and the sky turned amber, she returned from gathering dry twigs to find Taza hunched over the ground near the fire. He didn't see her approach. He was copying the letters. Evelyn froze. Taza stared hard at the earth, trying to mimic the curves and lines she had drawn. His brows furrowed in concentration. He wasn't just looking. He was learning, tracing her letters like someone trying to understand a map. She took a step forward. A twig snapped underfoot. He looked up, caught but not embarrassed. Their eyes locked. He pointed to the letters, then to her, then to himself. Then he repeated the motion, finger to the letters, to her, to himself. She understood. He wanted her to teach him. She knelt beside him, slowly picked up the stick, and in the dirt she wrote, "Sun." She pointed to the sky. "Sun," he followed, nodded. Then she wrote, "Water," pointed to the bowl near the fire. "Water." Again he nodded. "Waiter," he repeated clumsily. She smiled without realizing it. From that moment on, they met in the language of patience, of eyes and hands, of symbols and sounds slowly taking shape. They did not speak the same tongue, but every gesture, every repeated word, every shared glance began weaving a thread between them. And Evelyn realized, quietly and irrevocably, that sometimes understanding did not begin with words. It began with the will to listen. As the days turned to weeks, the rhythm between them settled into something quiet and steady. Mornings began with Evelyn speaking soft English into the wind, tracing letters in the dirt, holding objects, leaf, stone, fire, and giving them names. Taza listened, watched, and repeated with care. He was an attentive student, his brow furrowed. In thought, when the words tangled in his mouth, his expression proud in the rare moments they came out clear. But it wasn't just the words. He had begun to draw. At first, she noticed it only in passing, marks left on flat stones near the fire, faint and rough. One morning, she woke to find a piece of bark resting near her sleeping mat, a crude figure sketched in charcoal. A stick, form with long hair and a curved belly. She stared at it, unsure. Later that day, she found more on a large, smooth rock beside the canyon trail, black shapes drawn in careful sequence, a curled figure in the center, lines above it like heat. Or fire, a bird flying overhead, a single hand raised. She asked him what it meant. He only looked at the sky. She thought perhaps they were war stories or old Apache tales of birth and death and sky gods, symbols beyond her knowing, the kind of language spoken by those who did not trust words alone. Still, the drawings kept coming, each one a little, more detailed than the last. Sometimes he etched them with sharp stones, sometimes he smeared sod across bark with his fingertips, always in silence, always just out of her reach to understand, until one afternoon, when the sun hung low and the air shimmered with heat, Evelyn followed the sound of grinding stone and found him kneeling beside the canyon wall. A long, flat rock stretched in front of him like a canvas. He was bent low, focused, one hand smudged with black dust. She watched for a moment, unseen, and then she saw it. Not symbols, not stories, but a moment. Her moment. A woman curled on the ground, hair splayed, arms limp, a pool of something dark beneath her side. And opposite her, a man kneeling, arm outstretched, water skin in his hand, his face drawn with a line of worry between them, a sun just beginning to rise. She gasped. Taza heard her and turned, startled. She stepped closer, her throat tightening, the edges of her vision blurred. She didn't expect the tears, but they came, quiet at first, then harder, heavier, not from fear, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming wave of knowing that someone had not only saved her, but remembered, had honored it, cherished it. He knelt beside her again, not touching, just near. She turned to him, eyes wet, and said nothing, but he understood. This was not war art, not myth. It was memory, and to him it was sacred. From that day, she never looked at his drawings the same way. Each one became a page in a wordless diary, a language all their own, and slowly she began to add to them. Soft curves, lines for wind, outlines of stars, until their hands told stories together that neither tongue could yet speak. They spoke. No common language, yet the days began to fill with a strange, gentle fluency. Evelyn noticed the small things first. How Taza always gave her the ripest berries, placed closest to her side of the bowl. How he handed her the smoothest, flat stones for sitting. How he waited every evening until she took the first sip of water before he touched his own. She, in turn, grew attuned to his rhythms. She could sense when he needed silence, when his thoughts pulled inward like smoke retreating into stone. She began to teach him harder words: light, home, safe. He repeated them slowly, carefully, his voice rough but patient, as if tasting each word before he allowed it into the air. When he struggled, she would rest her fingers lightly under his chin to guide the sound. And when he finally pronounced a word right, his smile, small, barely there, felt like sunrise. Still, in quiet moments, doubt crept in. Evelyn wondered why he had kept her, why he fed her, tended to her, gave her warmth and space and silence to heal. Was it tradition, a tribal code? Was she to become something expected, a payment, a burden, a symbol? She never felt captive, yet never truly free either. She slept without rope, but not without questions. One morning, while Taza was out gathering roots, Evelyn wandered farther than usual. The canyon narrowed to a soft bend near a stream, and there, in the cool shade of overhanging stone, she found a leather satchel tucked beneath a ledge. Curiosity pulled her closer. Inside were drawings, not carved in stone but inked on hide and bark, dozens of them. Some of her sleeping, sitting by the fire, brushing her hair, others of landscapes, the moon, firelight. But one made her breath catch. It was large, folded carefully. She unfolded it slowly. 2 figures stood before a ceremonial fire, drawn, in stark contrast, one with light hair and soft curves, the other tall, wrapped in tribal cloth, face marked with quiet strength. One hand of each was extended toward the flame, almost touching. Evelyn stared at it, unsure. She didn't hear Taza approach until he stood behind her. When she turned, he didn't flinch, didn't try to hide what she'd found. Their eyes met. He stepped forward and pointed to the drawing, then to himself, then to her. She didn't speak, couldn't. Her chest was tight, her heart loud. He didn't move closer, didn't touch her, only waited, not demanding, just waiting. She looked back at the drawing, a man and a woman, 2 lives, 2 fires, 1 choice. And in that stillness, Evelyn understood. He did not save her to possess her. He saved her because he wanted her to choose, when she was ready, if she ever was. He was not claiming her. He was offering something wordless, but whole. And though she said nothing then, her fingers brushed the edge of the drawing, slowly folding it back gently, as if it might tear. She returned it to the bag, then turned to him, nodded once. Not yes, but not no. Just not yet. He nodded in return, the corners of his mouth lifting barely. They walked back in silence, side by side, the space between them no longer empty. The question had lingered in Evelyn's mind for days, like a splinter beneath the skin, small but persistent, aching each. Time she let herself feel too much, even after all they had shared. The words, the drawings, the quiet warmth, doubt still flickered behind her ribs like a candle struggling in the wind. One afternoon, while the sun dipped behind the canyon rim and shadows stretched long across the ground, she sat across from Taza by the fire. They had just finished eating. She watched him set aside their bowls, his movements as careful and deliberate as ever. He didn't look at her, but she knew he felt her staring. She wrapped her arms around her knees, pressed her chin to them, and whispered, "Why me?" He turned. Her voice was soft, unsure. "Why did you save me? Why did you keep me here, out of all? The ones who could have passed by? Why me?" He didn't answer, of course, not in words. His understanding of English was growing, but not enough to catch the full weight of what she was asking. Still, something in her tone, in the tremble of her voice, must have reached him. His eyes softened. He leaned forward, slow and deliberate, and placed a hand over his chest. Then he reached across the fire and touched the air in front of her heart. Heart! He didn't need to say it. She felt the words settle between them. "But I'm broken," she whispered. "You know that, don't you?" He tilted his head, searching her eyes. She took a breath, then lifted her sleeve slightly, revealing a thin scar trailing down her forearm. "I've been hurt by people who looked like me, by the ones who said they loved me, by the ones who left me bleeding." Taza watched, unmoving. She dropped her gaze. "I don't know how to be enough for anyone." A long silence stretched between them. Then, without a word, Taza rose and disappeared behind the rock wall where he kept his drawings. Curious, Evelyn followed a few moments later, her footsteps hesitant. He was kneeling, chalk and charcoal in hand, adding the final strokes to a new image on the largest slab of stone. As she approached, he stepped aside so she could see. 2 birds, one with wings extended but ragged, feathers missing, body scarred. The other whole and strong, positioned just behind, not flying ahead, not leaving, but tilted forward, ready to rise when the other was ready. She stared at it, unable to speak. Taza pointed to the wounded bird, then gently placed his hand over her heart again. Then he pointed to the second bird and touched his own chest. Her breath caught. This wasn't pity. This wasn't savior and saved. This was a choice, a quiet, patient willingness to walk beside her, not to fix her, just to fly with her if she ever wanted to rise again. Evelyn stepped forward. For a long moment, she looked down at his hand. Then, without trembling, she placed, her fingers on top of his. She didn't pull away. He didn't move. The wind whispered through the canyon, and something inside her, a weight she didn't know she was still carrying, began to lift. Not gone, not forgotten, but lighter. She didn't say anything. There were no words for what had just passed between them. But as the sun dipped below the rocks and the drawing of the birds glowed in the amber light, she knew she had found something rarer than safety. She had found someone who saw her and stayed. The moon hung low and full over the vast open field, casting silver light across the grasses that swayed gently in the midnight breeze. The wind had stilled just enough to allow for the delicate crackle of the fire, burning steady in a wide circle of stones. It was not large, not blinding, but warm, glowing like something ancient and sacred. Evelyn followed Taza through the meadow, her feet brushing over soft earth and wild sage. He had said little that day, his expression unreadable. There had been a quiet intensity in his movements, a purpose in how he gathered certain items and prepared a satchel with care. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. Something inside her, already, knew this night was different. He had asked her with a gesture and a single word, "Come." And she had. Now as she stepped into the circle of stones and fire, Evelyn felt something shift, not in the earth, not in the air, but within her. The flames glowed amber and gold, casting moving shadows across the field. Smoke curled upward, in slow spirals, disappearing into the night sky. Everything about the place felt ancient, as though the land itself had held its breath for this moment. Taza stood waiting, but not still. The firelight danced over his form, revealing more than just a man, revealing a presence. He wore ceremonial dress she had never seen before, soft leather that hugged his frame, embroidered with dark red thread in patterns that reminded her of river paths and bloodlines. Feathers were woven into the cords at his shoulders, delicate and strong, and beads shimmered faintly where the light caught them. His hair was pulled back and his eyes shone with a solemn calm. He looked taller somehow, not just in height, but in the way a mountain looks different when the sun strikes. It just right. Like he had stepped fully into who he was, not only a scout, not only her rescuer, but a memory, a tradition, a living echo of his people. Evelyn paused at the edge of the fire, her hands clasped in front of her like a child at a threshold. Her heart beat faster, louder, more uncertain than it had in weeks. She could feel the heat of the flames against her skin, but it was the weight of Taza's gaze that warmed her most. He walked toward her slowly, not ceremonially, not grandly, just with purpose. In his hands he held a necklace. It was handmade, intricately woven with beads of turquoise bone and shell. At its center, a symbol, two hands reaching toward each other, palms almost touching, with a flicker of flame rising between them. Evelyn stared at it. The fire cracked. An owl hooted somewhere in the distant trees. He held it out to her, not thrust, not forced, just offered. She looked from the necklace to his face, and in that moment, every piece of doubt she had tried to bury rose like floodwaters. Was she ready? Did she deserve this? What if she broke something sacred just by not understanding it? She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of the weight of what this gesture meant, of the life he was offering her, and the one she might leave behind if she took it. Afraid of stepping into something permanent after a lifetime of being temporary. She had lived so long, by instinct. Run, hide, survive. What did it mean to stay? Her breath came quickly, her palms slick with sweat. Her eyes darted from the necklace to the fire to his steady face, and yet he did not rush her. Then, after a long stillness, Taza slowly lowered the necklace. He stepped back, his eyes dropped, not in frustration, not in rejection, but in gentle understanding. He had seen her fear. He did not resent it. He turned. He began to walk away, not fast, not with drama, just enough to create space. But in that space, her chest ached as if something precious was slipping from her, not because it had been taken, but because she had not yet reached out for it. And then, without planning, without thinking, she whispered the first word he had ever taught her: "Stay, stay." It was a breath, a prayer, a choice. He stopped, turned. Their eyes locked across the fire. Evelyn stepped forward, her feet steady now. One step, another. Then she reached out, not with hesitation this time, but with clarity. Her fingers brushed his hand, warm and solid. "I don't know what this means," she said softly, "but I know what you mean to me." Taza took her hand in his. He didn't pull, didn't lead, just held it. She looked down at the necklace, still resting in his open palm. Her fingers reached for it, trembling only slightly now. She lifted it, placed it over her head, and let it fall against her chest. The beads were cool, the weight light, but something inside her clicked into place like the final stroke of a drawing. He looked at her, not with triumph, but with a deep, settled peace. Unknowing, they stood in the firelight, two silhouettes becoming one. The flames rose, and their shadows joined across the ground. There were no witnesses, no chance, no efficient, only the wind, only the fire, and two hearts saying yes without ever needing the word. A month passed since the night of the fire. The memory of it lived in Evelyn like a song, quiet but always playing, always present. She and Taza moved through the days as though they had always been side by side. There were no vows spoken aloud, no signed papers, but the bond between them was undeniable. It showed in how she filled his cup before her own, how he braided her hair in the mornings without needing to ask, in the way they laughed over mispronounced words and turned chores into gentle games. Evelyn had begun to learn more of his language, piecing together the rhythms and cadences of Apache words. She stumbled often, but Taza corrected her with patience, pride flickering in his eyes when she got something right. He too pressed forward in English, repeating her words with careful reverence. River, truth, belong together. They taught a few children from nearby camps, sitting in circles and using stones and sticks to draw animals and stars. The children learned quickly, mimicking Evelyn's sounds and Taza's gestures. Their laughter filled the air like bells, and Evelyn found herself smiling more often than not. She had stopped waiting for the past to come knocking until one day it did. It was late morning when the sound of hooves stirred the quiet. Birds scattered. The children looked up from their drawings. Taza rose immediately, his eyes narrowing. Evelyn followed his gaze toward the trail leading down into the canyon. A group of men appeared on horseback, 6 of them, 5 with rifles slung across their backs, one dressed in black, stiff-collared, holding a Bible at his side. A preacher. Evelyn's stomach twisted. They stopped a few yards from the clearing, the horses snorting, dust rising in swirls around their boots. The preacher was the first to speak. "Evelyn Harper," he called. "By the mercy of God, we've come to bring you home." She didn't answer. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. "You were taken," the preacher continued, his voice rising. "You were stolen from us by this savage, and we will not let you be lost." Evelyn stepped forward, slow but sure, her heart pounding but her voice clear. "I wasn't taken." The men exchanged uneasy glances. The preacher frowned. "I stayed," she said, "and I'm staying." "You don't understand what you're saying," one man snapped, lifting his rifle slightly. "He's bewitched you. He's got you trapped here like some—" "Like what?" she cut in. "Like someone who chose peace over fear? Like someone who wasn't beaten for speaking her mind? Like someone who was left to die by her own kind and saved by a man you all call a savage?" They hesitated. She pointed to the preacher. "You saw me beaten once, Reverend, in Dry Fork. You said nothing." He blanched. I remember all of you, she continued, her voice shaking now with the weight of truth. You turned your backs when He begged for help. You left me bleeding in the dirt. Taza moved beside her, not in front, not shielding, just there. She looked at the men, her chin lifted. I don't belong to you. I never did. The silence that followed was long and thick. Then, without a word, the preacher turned his horse. One by one the others followed, their pride stung, their rifles untouched. Evelyn stood still until the dust of their departure faded into the trees. Only then did she let out the breath she had held. Taza turned to her. He didn't speak, just reached out and gently touched the side of her face. And in his eyes she saw not relief, but something deeper, respect and love. They returned 2 days later. Evelyn heard them before she saw them, the distant rumble of hooves on dry earth, the sharp clink of rifles brushing saddles. She stood at the edge of the clearing, back straight, breath steady. This time, she didn't hide behind the canyon's curve or wait for Taza to move first. She faced them. 6 men rode in again, dust rising behind them like ghosts. The preacher led, his black coat stiff with pride, a cross hanging against his chest. Behind him, the same men from before, faces worn by sun and war, but not softened by either. Evelyn did not flinch. The preacher dismounted and stepped forward, his face calm, almost sorrowful, the way someone might look at a gravestone. Miss Harper, he began, we don't want trouble. We only came to take you back to where you belong. She did not answer immediately. She let the silence sit, let the wind carry her stillness to their ears. Then finally, she spoke. You already did that once. You left me where I belonged, bleeding in the dirt. The preacher's eyes narrowed. You forget yourself, child. You're one of us, raised among God-fearing folk. What you've become here, it's not natural. Evelyn took a step forward, her voice low, controlled, and sharp as a blade. What I have become is someone you never let me be, someone who can breathe without asking permission, someone who wasn't saved by your pity, but by his patience. One of the men in the back spat on the ground. You were kidnapped, brainwashed, probably threatened into staying. Evelyn turned toward him. Threatened by a man who listens more than he speaks, who waits instead of demands, who never once touched me without my consent. She shook her head slowly. No, I wasn't taken. I was chosen. And then she placed her hand gently on Taza's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Beneath her fingers, he stood behind her, silent, unmoving, not as her shield but her witness. Then with a shaky breath, she lifted her hand from his chest and pressed it to her own. Shia, she said, in broken Apache, her voice trembling with meaning. My person, my heart. The preacher's mouth fell slightly open, confused, disbelieving. None of the men reached for their guns. None spoke. They simply stared at her, as if trying to read a language they had never bothered to learn. And in that moment, Evelyn saw it clearly. They didn't hate her, not exactly. They just didn't understand, and perhaps they never would. She let her hand fall to her side. Taza gently took it in his. Without another word, the preacher turned and climbed back onto his horse. One by one, the others followed, heads bowed not in shame but in quiet defeat. This wasn't their story anymore. They disappeared down the trail, swallowed by dust and distance. Evelyn stood still for a moment longer until the sound of hooves faded. Then she looked up at Taza. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just searched her face for something, maybe fear, maybe regret. She gave him neither, only her hand held firm in his. Later that night, as firelight danced against the canyon walls, they sat side by side before a new rock surface, this one blank, waiting. Taza took a piece of charcoal. Evelyn placed her hand over his. Together, they began to draw. 2 figures, one pale, one dark, standing before a ring of fire, one hand stretched toward the flame, the other extended into shadow. neither pulling nor pushing, just touching. In the center, between light and dark, they drew a single shape, a heart, not perfect but whole, and as the fire crackled low beside them, Evelyn whispered into the silence, "Some love doesn't need permission, it only needs courage." If this story touched something deep inside you, if you felt Evelyn's courage, Taza's quiet strength, and the power of a love that crossed every line drawn by fear and ignorance, then we invite you to stay with us. This is Wild West Love Stories, where passion blooms in silence, where the bravest hearts speak without words, and where every tale reminds us that love is not owned by any one language, law, or bloodline. Subscribe to our channel and ride with us through more unforgettable romances of the American frontier, of outlawed love, sacred vows, and bonds forged in dust, fire, and devotion. And don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss a single story where bullets missed, but hearts didn't. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.